everyone, it's Inji again, and today I'm very excited to introduce to you a really cool tool to help you create your prototypes called Figma. So you should be very familiar with this diagram right now. These are the 5 steps of design thinking. And so far, you've been through the emphasize, define, and ideate steps where you've been getting to know your problem space, talking to potential users of your solution, thinking of what solutions you might want to do. And now is what I and a lot of other people consider the really exciting part, where you can actually prototype and test your solutions. And the important thing to remember here, especially as we talk about prototyping with this tool called Figma, that the goal here is not necessarily to create the final version of your app or website or whatever it is that you are thinking about your possible solution to look like. You want to still be creating prototypes. So even though this is not on paper or like using flashcards or things like that, this is still a prototype. So you want to be able to iterate quickly, make changes fast, test multiple times with users, and not be too bogged down by all the details of coding up an app or a website, which might take a very long time and be hard to change once you're done. That is where Figma comes in. So according to Figma's website, Figma is a powerful collaborative design tool for teams. You can explore ideas and gather feedback, build realistic prototypes, and streamline product development with design systems. Again, every time we read off of one of these quoted definitions from a website, it's a lot of words, and it isn't necessarily the easiest way to understand what Figma is for, so let's break it down. The point of Figma is to make realistic looking prototypes. Another word for these realistic prototypes are mock-ups. If I use this word in the presentation, that's what it means, of your website or app. And you can do this without needing to write a single line of code. And you'll be surprised at how realistic Figma prototypes look. It's really cool. I can show you an example later. You are able to drag and drop different components, and we'll walk through exactly how you do this. In order to simulate actual user interactions with your website or app. So it'll look like you're walking through clicking buttons and typing things on an actual app or a website. But in reality, all of it is mocked up. So that's why we're calling it a mock-up. So there's no backend. So any data you enter, nothing is stored. There's no code running in the background. It's literally just switching between different pictures, but it gives your users an idea of what the experience of using your app would be like without you needing to put in all the effort of coding up an app. So if all of it is fake, you might be wondering, why do we use Figma? Why not put in the time to make a very basic version of an iOS app or a very simple website, for example? And that is possible. Some people, if it works better for them, might skip the Figma step and go straight to making a bare bones website with the bare minimum features. But I think it's a really good idea to start off with some sort of tool to create a more advanced prototype than the paper one, because it is much faster while still allowing your users to interact with your key features. And it helps you collaborate with your team more easily. You might have heard, and there's no expectation you know this already, but you might have heard of version control when it comes to code. So you might use a tool like GitHub to be able to collaborate with your team when you're writing code and make sure no one is overwriting on each other's changes or working on the same thing at once. But it takes a little bit of time to learn. Figma makes this very easy. It's like working on the same Google Doc or the same Google Slides presentation. And you'll be able to see this in a second. And I think this fourth bullet point is really, really important because you don't have to start from scratch. There's a lot of free templates available on Figma where you have a lot of the hard work of grouping together different components and like coming up with the exact size of your button or making a like login page, like all of that stuff. Figma, somebody's already done that on Figma and released those templates for you to reuse and customize for your purpose. So yeah, it'll save you a lot of time, not just in the fact that you don't have to write code, but also that there's a lot of resources and a lot of documentation available for you. All right, so next, let's go to Figma and actually see what it's like to make a photo sharing app. So in this part of the workshop, we're going to go on Figma, and I'm going to show you how to create a project and get started on making a prototype with Figma, show you some of the basic tools. There's a lot more documentation out there. If you've done any coding in the past, you're probably used to just Google searching, I need to do this. Like, how do I do that? Going on websites like Stack Overflow or W3 Schools. Figma also has a great online blog community where users have asked questions, and some of this stuff is available on websites like Stack Overflow too. So if you have a question on how to do something on Figma, you'll likely find either a YouTube tutorial, Stack Overflow post, Figma blog post that can show you what to do, and you might see me doing that if I get a little stuck in the tutorial. All right, so let's get to it. So once you create a free Figma account, there are a lot of paid versions, but you don't need to spend any money. You don't need to put in your credit card information or anything. Just go with the free version. It is limited in the number of projects you can make, or you won't be able to access premium features, but you shouldn't need this for this step. So right now, there's already a team that Jason created here, but let's go through a process of creating a new team. So if you don't have a team, you'll just do create new. Now let's call this photo sharing app prototype. And then you could, one person needs to do this step where you create a project, name your team, and then add your team members. Right now I won't add anyone, but make sure you add all of your teammates, whoever creates the Figma project. And let's skip for now for me. And yeah, it'll ask you to pay money, but just choose starter. Well, and now you have your project. So with the free version, you'll only be able to create one file in your project, but that's okay. That should be all you need. So let's go ahead and edit that. So if you click on it, let's call this first prototype. So now we'll walk through some of the different cool things that you could do with Figma. So the goal here is to make a prototype for a photo sharing app that lets you create a profile, upload your own photos, and share your photos with friends and view your friends' photos. If this sounds very familiar, that's because there's about 1 million of these out there already. So this will look very similar to Instagram, Flickr, or some of the more trendier ones like Be Real or Laps or any of those. So yeah, we're just making a very basic photo sharing app to see what the process of designing one might look like. So first, let me introduce you to layers and frames. Those are the main building blocks of Figma. So the definition of a layer is any section of your design. This could be a single rectangle. So let's create a rectangle. This drop down here, the one with the square, will allow you to create different shapes. So let's create a rectangle. Once you create a rectangle, in your Layers tab, when you click on it, you see the rectangle show up. It's called Rectangle 1. And for example, if we create a polygon, we created a triangle, we see Polygon 1, and you could rename these. So if you don't like the name Polygon 1, you can call it Triangle. And you'll see later, as we add many different layers, it becomes very important that you name them in a way that's easy to recognize, and just by looking at the name, you know what part of your design it is. Otherwise, if you have a whole bunch of Rectangle 1, Rectangle 2, Rectangle 3, you're going to get very confused quickly. So when you're making your actual prototype, make sure you start off by naming things exactly what you want them to. And layers just aren't individual shapes. They could also be text, for example, my text. Then the name of the text automatically becomes my text. And a layer can also be a combination of multiple layers. So let's say that you want to build a house. Since I have a rectangle and a triangle, then we have a house with a name on it. Let's say that we want, instead of having to deal with 3 separate shapes here, the triangle, this rectangle, and the text, we just want to call this whole thing a house. We can create a new layer where this whole thing becomes a house. And the way you do that is by grouping this together, and you can create a component. So right now this is called component 1. You can call this house. So now every time you want to make a house, let's say that you're designing an entire neighborhood, right? You can just copy paste another house. The point of having layers and components is to organize your design. So instead of having rectangle, triangle, text, like 3 times, you just have 3 houses. That's just way easier to remember. And also, it helps you visualize a hierarchy better. So a house is made up of text, triangle, and rectangle. So you know that like a house is a larger grouping, and these 3 different components go inside the house. It's kind of like having a heading and a subheading and then text in a document, or for example in a chapter book you would have a chapter and then you'd have text inside that chapter, and then maybe you'd have different sections of the book like volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, and so on. So pretty much it helps establish a hierarchy, and it keeps you from getting too confused as you add more and more things. All right. So let's take a look at actually making an app. So let's delete all our wonderful houses. And I mentioned that the 2 basic building blocks in Figma are layers and frames. We just covered what a layer is. It can be any of these components, like any shapes, text, literally anything you add in your design. And it could also be combinations of those things as we make them into components. A frame is, you can think of it as one screen on your app or your website. So for example, if you want to go on Instagram, you would create an account. The account creation screen can be one frame in your design. Then after you create an account, you log in. The login is another frame, and the home page is another frame, and your profile is another frame, and so on. So basically a frame is one screen in your design. And you should have, for every single screen that you want to prototype, you should have a frame for it. And inside the frame, you can put any number of different layers. So now let's create one frame of our photo sharing app, and we'll do this in 2 ways. We'll start off with the hard way, and then I'll show you the easy way. And once I show you the easy way, you'll wish I started off with that, because that is probably how you want to go. So the hard way is to create everything from scratch. So first, let's create a frame. So I said a few minutes ago that a frame is one screen of your app. So you create a frame by clicking on this little, let's call it a hashtag. Click on this little hashtag and click frame. And then kind of make it roughly the size you want. This is kind of the dimensions of a phone screen, so I'll stick with that. And it shows up under your layers as frame 1. But remember how I told you that you don't want all of your layers to be named like 1, 2, 3 because you'll get confusing? Let's rename this as profile. So in our profile, let's see what things we might want to put. First, a profile picture. That can be a circle. rename this profile picture. And we would want username usually. We'll call this code for Mauritius. And then you could do a lot of the different actions you're probably familiar with, the text like centering and moving around. You can move this more up to be centered with the circle. Play around with it. It's a lot of fun. I personally think design is a lot of fun, so I always have a lot of time to spend way too much time aligning things perfectly, finding just the right color, things like that. So don't spend too much time on it, but have fun with it. Then we'll call this username. We have our profile picture, our username, and then we can have like the photos. So this is user photo 1. And then let's say caption. And then user photo 2. And then caption 2. And notice how if you ever get confused what layer corresponds to what part of your design, if you hover over the name, it'll highlight in blue which part of the design it is. This always saves my life when I'm a little bit confused and have too many things going on at once. And then, so yeah, we have a profile picture, a username, photo 1, photo 2 with corresponding captions. But notice how we have two things that are almost exactly the same, photo and caption, photo and caption. And it's starting to look a little long. We only have just a couple things right now, but we're already at like 7 different layers. So let's try to simplify this a little. So instead of having 2 of the same thing here with the photo and caption, let's make the photo and caption go together, because let's say in our app, every photo has to have a caption. So we can actually turn this into a component like we did with the house before. So select both of these. That'll be either shift click, command click, control click, depending on what your computer is. Once you select the 2 things that you want to turn into a component, click on the little triangle button again and create a component. So now when you hover over this, notice how it says component 1, and you can use the little drop down arrow next to it to see that it's comprised of a photo and a caption. Let's call this a post, because a post has a photo and a caption. So now we actually don't need this exact same thing below. Let's go ahead and delete those and then just duplicate our post. And when you duplicate it, just show, when you copy paste, like Control C, Control V, it just shows up right on top of the old one, so drag it down. And then you have 2 posts right now, and you can go ahead and change caption 1 to caption 2 if you'd like. See if it'll let me do that. There we go. So yeah, components let you very easily reuse the same thing multiple times, which, for example, you're gonna have a lot of photos in your photo sharing app, so it'll make your life a lot easier if you're able to have multiple photos. So this is a very basic version of our photo sharing app's profile page, but I told you that this was the hard way. Imagine trying to get this to look as cool as Instagram or BeReal. That'll take you a lot of time dragging around, like playing with the captions and trying to get the format just right. The building blocks are there, but to save you some time, let me show you what other people have already made and are letting you use for free. So you might see right next to layers, there's an assets tab where my mouse is. If you click on that, right now you see a bunch of different screens that people have already made. So these are all frames. Remember, a frame is one screen of your app, and people have made all these different types of frames. And this is for an app, but you can also switch to our website. And let's look at app for now. So remember, this is our original, we constructed it from scratch profile, but now let's look at this. So we click on profile and then we click insert. This already has a lot of the things that we wanted to include on our profile screen, but it just looks a lot prettier because people already decided on the font and the spacing and things like that. Of course, it's not perfect because it doesn't have all of the things we want. This is just a generic profile page, but we want to include photos in our profile. So let's go back to layers, and you can see that, let's rename this so we don't get confused. Profile from scratch. So that's one frame, and you know that it's a frame because a little hashtag icon to the left of it. And now we have our profile that we copied from assets. So here you see the different components that go into it. So you can see there's a frame within a frame, which you can absolutely do. So you have your status bar, you have your header, you have your profile picture, you have your profile information, and you have the tab bar, which is at the bottom, lets you navigate between your home page, your search page, your new upload button, things like that. And we don't need all of those things. For example, we like having the name and the username, but let's say we don't need email, links, and bio, and we want to add the pictures. So let's go ahead and do that. So we don't need username, email, links, bio. So let's just go ahead and delete that. Or I didn't mean to delete username, sorry. We actually like having that. Let's start deleting from email. So we have our name and our username. And of course we can always edit this to be whatever text we want. Like this. And notice that even the grouping under name, it has the name text and the actual person's name. So you could group together any number of things. You could have groupings of groupings of groupings. It's much easier if you are able to group things that way. This is very similar to how we created a component, but usually we just group things together if we don't think we'll reuse it. Like for example, there's probably only one place you'd put your name in an app, but a lot of places where you'll put photos. All right, and then like before, we already conveniently created our post component. So we want to add posts back to here. We want to customize this a little bit. So we copy paste. We have post 1, then we have post 2. There we go. And now it looks like a photo sharing app. And now if we want to group these together even further, notice how we have a profile section, information section, and now we have a section with 2 posts. So there we go. So when we copy pasted it, it was over here. We can always move these down so that it makes sense. It doesn't matter because you dragged and dropped it, but if it makes more sense for you to see like what appears on the top first, you can drag these down to chronologically where it would appear. And now you just have 2 posts, but it might be cleaner if we can group them together. And then let's do group selection. And now they're in a group, but let's rename it. call this user post since it has a lot of users posts. All right, so now we have a profile section where we have a status bar, header, profile, picture, information about the user, a bunch of posts from the user, and our tab bar. So that's a basic profile of our user. And now let's do one more layer so that we can show how to switch between the two. Let's go to assets, and then let's make a feed. Very conveniently, this is what we'd want our homepage to look like, with maybe a few changes. So let's drag this up. Oops. Let's drag our feed over here. So now we have our profile and our feed. And let's say that we want to be able to switch between our profile page and our feed. You can actually simulate this. And you can actually simulate this using a wireframe. And a wireframe is a way for you to emulate clicking on a button or doing any sort of other action, maybe clicking, it might be swiping, it might be waiting a certain amount of time, or any other action you could take on a website or an app and see what that would do for the user. And of course, you're not actually coding up what happens when you click on a button. All of it is all pretend. So you're just switching between the two screens when the user does something. All right. So in order to create your wireframe, you can go to prototype. Right now you're on design. Design has all of the cool features where you can change the color, change the font, change the locations of all your frames. Prototype is pretty much where you can control the wireframing. So it allows you to draw the connections of, if you click on this part of your frame, this should be where the user goes. All right. So we'll just do one action right now, which will be switching between the profile page and the feed. So the way you do that, if you think about on Instagram how you do it, is on this bar down here. If you're on your profile page, the circle with your profile is highlighted, you would click on the home icon. And then vice versa, from your home page, when home is highlighted, if you want to get to your profile, you would click on the profile icon. Let's figure out how to show this action in Figma. All right, so let's wireframe the interaction of going from the Explore page to your profile page, or sorry, your feed to your profile page. So first, let's click on where we'd want to start. So we said that when you click on the home button from your home button from your profile page, you would go to your feed. So let's find where the home button is. So it's on our profile, it's in our tab bar, and it's in tabs, and it is this one. As you can see, that's highlighted here. So click on that so it's highlighted in blue, and then click on plus for interaction. So what that just did is you are now able to add an interaction for when you click on that home button. You're able to decide what happens. So when you click, and you could change this to like if you drag it, if you hover over it, but let's just do when clicking, the default is none, but you want to navigate to your feed. So right now, when you click navigate to, it shows you the options of the different frames in your design right now. And we want to navigate to feed. So select feed, and then this arrow appears showing that when you, on your profile, if you click on the home button, it'll take you to your feed. So let's see what happens. And in order to, this is really cool, in order to see this play out, you can click the play button. And it'll take you to a new tab where you're able to view your design. It takes a second to load. And this blew my mind the first time I saw it. This was the coolest thing ever. So you're on your profile page, you're just using your app, right? And then you want to go to your feed. So you click on home. And just like that, you're on your feed. So it really looks like it really feels like to your tester that they're using your app in reality when this is just pretty much a whole bunch of fancy pictures you put together. I think that's the coolest thing ever. Let's say you want to go back to your profile. So I click on profile icon. Nothing happens, right? That is because we didn't create an interaction the other way around. So we created an interaction to go from profile to feed, but not from feed to profile. So let's go ahead and add that. Feel free to pause the video and try adding it yourself before you see how you do it. Let me show you. All right, like we just did, we find whichever button we want to click on. So in this case, it would be on feed, and that would be your profile button. So click on that so it's highlighted, and then add an interaction. On click, you want to navigate to your profile. All right, and now you see two arrows that are going in both directions, so you know that both versions of the button work. All right, so you're on your profile. You want to go to your home page. So you click on home, you see your feed, and now you want to go back to your profile. So you click on your profile, you're back to your profile. You can keep going forever and ever. But remember, we didn't create interactions between any of the other components that we have in our design. So if you click on notifications, search, profile picture, edit profile image, we didn't create any interactions, and in fact we didn't create any other screens other than those two. So those buttons won't do anything. In fact, if you try clicking somewhere you haven't created an interaction for yet, it'll show this little highlight showing this is what you actually can click. So yeah, I encourage you to have a lot of fun with this. There are a lot more assets you can use. For example, if you want to create a button, there's already different button designs that people have made for you. You can resize it, change the color of it. For example, go back to design. If you don't like this plain black button, you can make it a red button, things like that. You can play around with that. And for example, if there's a button or an icon that you can't find under assets, like one thing that I was looking for was repost. There's no repost icon, so what I just do is look up repost icon PNG, and I like this one. So then I just copy the image, and then I paste it. Just allow to access your clipboard, and then resize it. And I can use it just like any other component in my layer. So it's called image 1 right now, but you can just rename it to repost. And it could be used as a button or an icon in the same way any of the other components are used right now. So yeah, I encourage you to have a lot of fun with this. Try a lot of different things, make different frames, and yeah, in general, have a good time. And this is a collaborative project, so once you invite your teammates, all of you can work on this together. So you see my little triangle cursor now that I'm moving around. Your teammates will all have different color cursors, so if you're dragging and dropping things at once, you can see everyone's working on it at the same time. I suggest that once you decide which screens you want to prototype, so once you choose your frames, maybe split up the work of designing each of those frames. So maybe one person on your team takes a profile, one person on your team takes the feed, one person takes the search function, like if you click on this, like being able to search for different accounts, another person can take the upload screen, things like that, and then come together, either over video call or meet in person, and do the wireframing, the prototyping together, so that all of you are on the same page about where clicking what button should take you to. It's easier to do that if you're all talking to each other and collaborating. Yeah. And to wrap it up, I just want to give you all a few tips. So here are the do's and don'ts of what you should and should not mock up. The most important thing to remember is that you want to pick the most important tasks for your user to do. So refer to the task flows from the key tasks you defined in the previous assignment. For example, for the photo sharing app, the most important experiences for your users will be like, does the user know how to get from their profile page to the home page and vice versa, which is what we just did? Does the user know how to upload a photo? Does the user know how to interact with their friends' posts? Does the user know how to search for their friends? And pick these core actions, like maybe 3 of them, so you have enough time to make a good Figma, and then start creating your design. If you just start creating with a vague idea in mind without either like sketching out on paper or making an outline of what you want to prototype, you might end up going in a lot of different directions and confusing yourself. So pick 3 of the key tasks, or maybe give or take 1, 2, or 4, depending on how complex each of them are, and then draw out what frames you want and what interactions you want between them before you get started. And some things you should not mock up at this stage unless you have a lot of free time, you're already done, and you're really excited about Figma, are things that are kind of more details that don't really matter for a first prototype. For example, logging in and out of your app isn't super important at this stage when we're prototyping our photo sharing app. Having like a bunch of different profiles that have different names and pictures, like Instagram has like millions of users now. You don't need to make 1 million profiles. In fact, you probably don't even need to make 10. Maybe make like 2 or 3 to show the difference between your own profile and a friend's profile, for example. You probably don't need to show like how a user would block and unblock a friend, report a post, change their password, clear their search history, or any number of things, because these are not related to the main functionality of your app. And you don't need to have a perfect logo or a perfect color scheme yet. You should decide on a basic logo and a basic color scheme as a placeholder while you're doing your prototype, especially if clicking on your logo will bring you to a home page or something like that. But it doesn't need to be like the most perfect, beautifully graphically designed thing at this point. Some other tips are start by picking a very simple color scheme for your mobile or web app. And there's a lot of resources out there on different color schemes with the exact like hex codes, like 0FF. You might have seen those when you're selecting a color from the little like color selector square back in Figma. There's a lot of websites out there that show which colors go well together and what the codes are for those colors, so you can very easily use them. Also, I can't emphasize this enough, create reusable components as far as possible. Don't be like me in our first iteration of the photo sharing app, where I created like rectangle 1, rectangle 2, rectangle 3 to refer to all the photos. Make a photo component and reuse as much of it as you can. And you do not have to create everything from scratch. There are a lot of templates for both mobile and web apps, so depending on whether you're doing an app or a website, there's a lot of different components you can use, or use the Figma kits. Also, be bold and creative while keeping the design simple. You can get inspiration from some of your favorite apps. Clearly, my tutorial was inspired by Instagram. Think of what apps kind of look similar or do similar things to your idea, and maybe check out what kind of task flows that they have. That could be a good starting point for planning your Figma. And most of all, have fun with it. This is a lot of fun. It takes the stress out of having to code up a prototype, and I'm really excited to see what you all come up with and to test out these prototypes. It's your turn now. The deliverable is a final prototype of your idea. This Figma will be the final prototype, since you won't be coding up an app or a website for this challenge. If you would like to take it further, that is awesome, and we would love to see it, but the only thing that's required of you is to make a Figma. So the deliverables are cover 3 important task flows from your product, and optionally, if you have time, any additional ones. The flow should be smooth and the screens should connect to each other nicely. So every screen that you make should connect to another one in some way. You shouldn't just have individual screens without a wireframe, sorry. It's okay that some buttons are not connected if they're not part of the important task flows, but you shouldn't just have a frame that's floating out on its own with no button that connects it to the other ones. Pay attention to visual design aspects such as fonts, colors, grids, alignment, etc. We're not expecting it to be perfect, and we're not expecting you to spend forever on it, but it's a cool thing to start thinking about at this stage. And be mindful about the usability and user experience details. Think about how you use your favorite apps and what things are convenient about it, what things are inconvenient. And think along those same lines when you're making your own prototype. And be sure to address the limitations of the lo-fi prototype based on the feedback you receive from your users. So if someone that you tested with didn't like something about your lo-fi prototype, you don't need to just create exactly the paper prototype on Figma. You can change things about it and maybe even change a task flow depending on your feedback. And this is due, the in-progress prototype is due July 1st, and the final prototype is due August 2nd. So you'll have slightly over a month to work on this. And then there is a report that's due too. So the goal for the report is to get some feedback on your final prototype and write some concluding thoughts on your project. So once your prototype is complete, you'll be able to test with users. So you'll be able to click on that little play button on Figma and have your users click through it, and then you can gather feedback similar to what you did for your lo-fi prototype. Do this step after your prototype is at least partially complete, and this is due August 2nd. All right, have fun, and thank you very much for listening.